He's been a great voice for strong Republican principles that are so important, not just to all of us personally, but also to effective government and effective leadership. One of the things I like so much about him is he's done something in Louisiana that we're still fighting to gain and protect here in New Hampshire, and that is to make school choice available for the students in his state. We all know how important that is. We have a governor here in New Hampshire who wants to eliminate school choice. She thinks that every child should be stuck in the same failing schools as every other child. We think every parent should be in charge of their children's education and should have the opportunity to choose the best environment for that child. Governor Jindal agrees with us with that. Let's give a warm first in the nation welcome to Governor Bobby Jindal.
Thank you very much. I'm really glad that you're here. Thank you, Jennifer. Thank you so much. Thank you all very, very much. Thank you very much. Jennifer, thank you for that very generous introduction. I want to thank the state Republican Party for hosting this. I also want to commend them for partnering with such a wonderful organization and supporting women who've been victims of the most horrible, horrible crimes. Now, I want to start today by thanking you all for allowing me to come speak to you today. I want to tell you what I want to talk to you about today. I want to talk to you about the need for fairness in our tax code system. I want to talk to you about the need for the successful to pay more in taxes to the government. I want to talk to you about what a great success President Obama has done in the Middle East, this historic agreement he's negotiating with Iran. And I want to talk to you about my grandparents who immigrated. I'm sorry, I've got the wrong notes. This is Hillary Clinton's speech. I'm sorry, this isn't my speech. Delete all that, forget all that, never mind all that. Let me start over. What I really want to talk to you about today is what worries me the most. And I had to think long and hard about this. What worries me the most about the President Obama legacy. You think of all the things he has done to our country. You think about $18 trillion of debt. You think about Obamacare. You think about that failed foreign policy where he refuses to stand with Israel. So much of this can be undone by a conservative in the White House. The thing that concerns me the most is what this president is doing to redefine America, to redefine the American dream. If you listen to his speeches, you watch his policies, this president seems intent on dividing us by class, by geography, by race, by gender, by income. This is a president who tries to teach us that America is about redistribution, a larger, more expensive, more intrusive federal government. I don't know about you, but that is not the American dream my parents taught me. The American dream I learned about was an America where our best days are always ahead of us, not behind us. An America where the circumstances of your birth don't determine your outcomes as an adult. An America where if you're willing to work hard and get a great education, there's no limit on what you can accomplish. An America where you don't have to be born to the right parents, to a wealthy family, to the right zip code to do great things. And the reason this is so important to me is that my parents, they have actually lived the American dream. I want to briefly share their experiences with you. My dad's one of 9. Grew up in a house without electricity, without running water. Was the only one in the family to get past the 5th grade. Now I know because we heard these stories every single day growing up. That's right. It wasn't snow, but it was uphill to school and back, uphill both ways. You had that kind of father too. Try to get an allowance from a father like that. Good luck. Here's the amazing thing about my parents' story. Over 40 years ago, my dad and his pregnant wife, my mom, they came halfway across the world to Baton Rouge, Louisiana. I want you to think about something. They had never been on a plane before. The first time they get on a plane, they're flying to America. I try to tell my kids there was no internet, there was no Google. They couldn't go online and search and see what kind of place Baton Rouge was. They had never even met somebody who had been to Baton Rouge and could come back and tell them what it was like. And yet they came. They were coming to an idea as much as they were coming to a geography. They were coming to the idea of freedom and opportunity. They were coming for the American dream. When they landed, my mom went to school at LSU. My daddy needed a job. They were running out of money. They were living in married student housing. He opened up the Yellow Pages and started calling company after company looking for a job. Now, I don't know how many weeks, days, hours this took. I don't know how many people slammed the phone down or laughed at him. But he finally convinced a guy from a railroad company to give him a chance. Sight unseen, the guy tells my dad, you can start work Monday morning. I love what my dad tells his new boss. Hasn't even met the guy yet, hasn't started work, tells his brand new boss, he goes, that's great. Says, now look, I don't have a car, I don't have a driver's license. Tells his new boss, you're going to have to pick me up on the way to work Monday morning. I mean, who does that? Who says that? And the guy was so taken by his enthusiasm to work, that's exactly what he did. 6 months later, I was born. I was what you would politely be called a pre-existing condition. There was no Obamacare. All that means is my parents' insurance didn't cover me. Now, I was born at Women's Hospital, the same hospital where many years later, 2 of our 3 children would be born. And this is what I love about what happens next. My dad goes to the doctor after I was born. Says, look, my insurance isn't covering this birth. And then he shook hands with the doctor. He said, I'm going to send you a check every month until I pay this bill in full. No contracts, no paperwork, no government program. Just 2 guys shaking hands in a hospital. Because that's how you did things back then. I don't know how that would work today. It's a lot more complicated today. I have great insurance. We had to fill pages and pages of paperwork when our kids were born at that hospital. I've asked my dad since then, I said, how do you pay for a baby on layaway anyway? I mean, think about that. If you skip a payment, can they take the baby back? What does the hospital do? He tells me, he goes, you were such a bad little baby, we would have skipped a payment and sent you back if that was an option. He goes, no, you're paid for. By the way, I said 2 of our children were born there. The 3rd child was supposed to be born there. That was the child that was born at home. And that's a whole other story. I won't get into that today. I'll just tell you 2 things. One, we didn't do it on purpose. And secondly, every man here, you need to go home and thank your moms, your wives, your sisters. There's a reason the good Lord Almighty lets women, not men, have babies. I don't care how tough you guys think you are. The dumbest thing I ever heard was at church a couple of weeks later. A guy came to me and said, the exact same thing happened to me. I said, what do you mean? He said, I had me a kidney stone. It's the exact same thing. I said, well, unless it was a 9-pound kidney stone, I wouldn't tell my wife that. You know, Mark Twain said, the older we get, the smarter our parents become. I don't know about you, but I'm discovering that. And one of the things I'm discovering is the older I'm getting, the more and more I'm turning into my father. And I hate it. I find myself saying things that as a child he would say to me, and I swore I would never say to my own children. Oh, he would say crazy things like, if all your friends jumped off a bridge, would you jump off a bridge? No idea what that means. I say it to my kids. He used to say to us, you don't live in a democracy as long as you live under my roof, you're living in a dictatorship. Hated when he said that. Say it to my kids. There were 2 things he said that I want to focus on today. Number 1, he used to tell my brother and me this. He'd say, sons, I'm not giving you a famous last name. I'm not giving you an inheritance. But he said, I'll make sure you get a great education. Because if you get a great education, you work hard, there's no limit on what you can accomplish in this great country. Now, the second thing he would say, he'd tell my brother and me, he'd say every night, you need to get on your knees and you need to thank God Almighty that you are blessed to be born in the greatest country in the history of the world, the United States of America. Now, I'll be honest with you, I didn't appreciate both of those things as a child, especially the second. Everybody I knew was born in America. All my friends, my neighbors, every kid at school. But now I'm beginning to understand, now that I'm raising my own children, what he was trying to teach me. Let's take the first. So in Louisiana, we have fought hard to preserve the American dream for our children and our grandchildren. The first issue I want to talk about, and Jennifer talked about this, we have fought for school choice. Now, why is that so important? The reality is, in America, we like to say we've got equality of educational opportunity in our country. It sounds great. Every child should have the chance to get a great education. But it's also not true. The reality is that a child's zip code too often determines whether that child's going to get a great education. If you're wealthy, you live in a great neighborhood, chances are your child can go to a great public school. Or you can save and send your money to a great private school. But if you live in a poor zip code, chances are your child is trapped in a failing school. This is not acceptable for a number of reasons. It's not acceptable because it's bad for our economy and so many other indicators. It's not acceptable because we live in an aspirational society where we want children to be able to do better than their parents. We have a moral imperative. It is the definition of the American dream, that our children should be able to work hard and do better. But it's also not acceptable because we're a self-governing republic. We need to teach that next generation to think for themselves, to be able to make decisions for us when they go to vote, to train the next generation of leaders. It's why our country has funded public education in the first place. Yet you've got leaders like your governor. You've got Governor Hassan, you've got President Obama that are standing in the way of school choice. And it's really not complicated. What it really boils down to is this. Instead of forcing the children to follow the dollars, we should let the dollars follow the child. In New Orleans, 90% of our children are in charter schools. We have doubled the percentage doing reading and math on grade level in 5 years. I'm not here to tell you every child should be in a charter school. In Louisiana, we have statewide school choice where parents can send their children to private schools, to parochial schools, to independent schools. And I've heard moms tell me this is the first time their children have brought home homework. First time their children are wearing uniforms. The first time their children are thinking about going to school beyond high school. The first time they feel like their children are safe in school. And I'm not here to tell you that every child should go to a private school. We have course choice in Louisiana, where you can start your day in a public school and go and take courses from private providers throughout the day, from employers and others. We've got a scholarship, tuition rebate program just like you do here. I'm here to tell you that every child learns differently. Public schools, charter schools, homeschooling, private schools, online programs, dual enrollment, we trust parents. The unions think differently. The head of a union in New Orleans, a teachers union, said this: parents don't have a clue when it comes to making choices for their children. That's what this debate is all about. I met with moms the next day that told me we make choices for our children every day. We know the needs of our children better than the bureaucrats in Baton Rouge or Washington, D.C. This debate, like so many others, whether it's about health care, Second Amendment rights, religious liberty rights, whether it's about drinking a big gulp in New York City, it's all about the same thing. We trust the American people more than bureaucrats. And by the way, it's this same elitist mindset that they know better than us that leads your governor and others to try to force Common Core into local classrooms all across the country. I'm here to tell you we've got to get rid of Common Core. Now, a lot of politicians say they're against Common Core. I'm actually in federal court right now suing President Obama, suing Arnie Duncan, saying they have violated the Constitution and federal law to try to force Common Core in the classrooms. I'm all for high standards. My problem with Common Core is twofold. One, we have never allowed the federal government to make curriculum decisions. And where does it end? Today we're talking about math and ELA. Where's tomorrow? Will this administration want to dictate how we teach American history? Can you imagine how they would teach American history? It'd be about victimhood. You know, we have the first president of the White House who doesn't believe in American exceptionalism. In 2012, I came to New Hampshire. I went to other states campaigning against President Obama's reelection. And I said here and I said elsewhere that he was the worst president since Jimmy Carter. But I was wrong. And I admitted I was wrong after that election. I went to D.C. at a CPAC speech in Washington, D.C. I apologized to the president for being disrespectful. That was disrespectful to Jimmy Carter. Jimmy Carter was just incompetent, but at least he believed in American exceptionalism. This president doesn't believe in American exceptionalism. Can you imagine if those kinds of bureaucrats were dictating how we teach civics and American history? But I've got a second concern with Common Core. Any parent, and I've got 3 school-age children, any parent that's tried to help their child do Common Core math knows what I'm about to say next. So my little boy, he is now 8. When he was 7, he was in the 2nd grade last year, does well in math. Gets all the answers right, brings home his homework, brings home a test. He had a test from his teacher in the 2nd grade at school, and he brought it home. Half the test was getting the answers right. It was very simple math. 18 plus 4 is 22, addition, subtraction. When you and I were kids, you added up the numbers in a column and you carried over the digits. Well, the other half of the test was you had to show why your answer was right using Common Core methods. So you have circles and boxes and rectangles, and 18 becomes 20 minus 2, and it's, 20 minus 2 plus 4, and you got to draw circles on one side and boxes, and it's about 6 different steps. My little boy has the attention span of a gnat. I mean, he's a normal 7-year-old boy. Come on, give him a break. So when the teacher asked him to do this, this is what he wrote to every single question. He got all the answers right, and then it said, show why your answers are right. And he wrote, just because it is, for every single question. Teacher sent it home with a note. My wife talked to him, and then she says, look, I can't get anywhere with him. She goes, you talk to him. I sat down with him, and after about 30 seconds, I gave up. I said, Slade, go outside and play. I can't tell you did anything wrong. The first issue I want to talk to you about is education reform, because that is part of preserving the American dream for our children. The second issue is in Louisiana, we have made a serious commitment to shrinking the size of our government, because we measure prosperity not by how government is doing, but by how our people are doing in the private sector. Now, I'm not here to tell you I've slowed down the growth of government, because that's what they talk about in D.C. D.C., they say you can't balance the budget. You can't reduce spending. That's nonsense. In Louisiana, we have actually cut our budget 26%, $9 billion smaller than the day I took office. We have over 30,000 fewer state employees than the day I took office, the smallest number in decades. The people benefiting, the people of Louisiana. Our economy has grown twice as fast as the national average. Job creation 3 times as fast. More people living and working in Louisiana, earning a higher income, the highest per capita income ranking, after 25 years of out-migration, 7 years in a row of in-migration. But let me tell you this. When you take on the spending, you're not going to make everybody happy. The government crowd, the left, they criticize me for cutting too much. They criticize me for sticking to my pledge. By the way, I made a pledge I wouldn't raise taxes. And we haven't raised taxes. We enacted the largest income tax cut in our state's history. One of the things I love about New Hampshire Republicans is that you guys are so hard-headed about no income tax, no sales tax. I think that is a great thing about New Hampshire. My first term, one of the most senior Democrats in the legislature criticized me in the press. He said, that Jindal, he's just too stubborn. He's as stubborn as a mule when it comes to raising taxes. He just won't raise taxes. I said, Senator, that's great. I'm going to put that in every campaign ad when I run for re-election. But the reality is that there's a political price to pay. At one point, when we were fighting for school choice, there were so many protesters. They tried to recall the speaker. They tried to do all kinds of things. There were so many folks protesting in front of the House, in front of the Capitol, that I finally told my kids, I said, when you see those protesters in front of the state Capitol, I said, that's just a parade for Daddy. That's why they got Daddy's picture on all those posters up there. The reality was, when I was elected in my first term, we won in the primary, something that had never been done before by a non-incumbent. My second election, my re-election, we got the largest percentage of the vote ever, over 2/3. And I'm here to tell you, my popularity has certainly dropped at least 15 to 20 points because we've cut government spending, because we took on the teacher unions. But we need that kind of leadership in D.C. We need conservative. We don't just need a Republican in the White House. We need a conservative in the White House who will say, we're not just slowing down the growth in government spending, we're cutting government spending. And here's a crazy idea. Here's a crazy idea. Why don't we just spend as much as we're taking in, and why don't we actually start paying down that debt instead of continuing to borrow from China? If we don't have a major course correction, if we don't have a major course correction in Washington, D.C., we will be the first generation that mortgages our children's future. And that brings me to the second thing my dad said. I told you the first thing he told us was, sons, I'm not leaving you a famous last name. But if you work hard, get a great education, there's no limit on what you can do in this great country. The second thing he told us was to get on our knees and give thanks to God Almighty. We were blessed to be born in the greatest country in the history of the world. I want to close with the two observations. One is this. When my parents came to America, they were coming to be Americans. We used to be proud to say that. We used to be proud to call America the great melting pot. Now, my parents loved India. They're proud of their heritage, but they weren't coming to raise Indian Americans. They were coming to raise Americans. I don't know about you, I'm tired of the hyphenated Americans. No more African Americans, no more Indian Americans, no more Asian Americans. And the final thing I'll say to you is this. The reason it is so important that we beat Hillary Clinton in 2016, it's not simply to get a Republican there. It's because I want my children, I want your children. One day I want my grandchildren, I want your grandchildren to be able to say the same prayer that my dad taught us, to give thanks to God Almighty, because this is the greatest country in the history of the world. Not because of our government, not because of the monuments, not because of those beautiful buildings in Washington, D.C., because our founding fathers understood the purpose of a limited government was to preserve our God-given rights. And so we can win. We must win. We will win. It is absolutely critical that we beat Hillary Clinton come 2016. God bless y'all, and thank y'all very, very much for allowing me to come talk to y'all today. Oh, well. Thank y'all very, very much. I'd be happy to take your questions. I did make a promise I'd give a shout out to my folks from Rhode Island. I was proud to be, there are a few of them back here. I was proud to be the head of the College of Republicans for the state of Rhode Island. I won't tell you how many years ago that was, but it was a long time ago. So welcome to the neighbors from Rhode Island. And I guess I'll just call on folks here. Yes, ma'am.
I was wondering, because I feel like the education...
All right, Governor Bobby Jindal is awaiting the microphones to come out so people in the audience can ask him questions. Here they come. But apparently their microphone's not working. So he's nodding a lot, and hopefully we'll know what the question is by the answer he gives. And while we're doing that, we'll refer you over to...
School choice and vouchers.
That's a great question. So the question, for those who couldn't hear, was that education should be a state-by-state issue. If, as president, what could a president do in terms of promoting school choice and other issues in states, because it should be a state-by-state issue. So I wrote a detailed paper on education. One of the things I've done, I know a lot of people thinking about running have talked about polling and fundraising, consulting. We formed a not-for-profit think tank for a year and a half and put out detailed policy papers on foreign policy, on health care, on energy, on education. I think we're the only one that has put out a detailed plan about how do you repeal and replace Obamacare on education. Let's start with the reauthorization of the No Child Left Behind Act, by the way, which I think was a mistake and a big expansion of the federal role in K-12 education. I think we need to return the Federal Department of Education back to its original intended purpose. It needs to be shrunk in size, in funding, in power. It needs to focus on deregulation, transparency, and true civil rights enforcement. Not the kind of nonsense where the DOJ sued us to stop school choice, but true civil rights enforcement. So I think a lot of the input-based teacher quality programs of the Department of Education should either be turned into block grants or eliminated. They're wasting billions of dollars, no measurable impact on student learning. Title I funding should not only be made portable for students, it should be made divisible so it can follow the child to a public school, private school. It should be divisible by course, so you can start your day in a public school, take private courses. In those ways, the federal government can get out of the way and allow local teachers, local parents, local school districts and states to make the best decisions. I think one of the things the federal department can do is to help facilitate the benchmark of different tests so that if folks take tests in different states, they can compare their results without all having to take the same test. And so there are limited roles the Federal Department of Education can take that will help encourage competition and choice without trying to force it. Now, what Arne Duncan has done is that if you want a No Child Left Behind waiver, if you want your own tax dollars back, you're going to have to adopt Common Core, or you're going to have to do what we tell you is right. That is an unprecedented power grab. But make no mistake about it, when we get rid of Common Core, there'll be another version of this. This isn't the first time the federal government is trying to take over local classrooms, and it won't be the last. So we need to shrink the size. Even if you have a Republican president, we shouldn't want them to be able to abuse the powers of the Federal Department of Education. Yes, ma'am, the back, and I'll come back here, and I'll look over here.
Actually, Governor, we have time for one last question. So,
Oh, I'm sorry.
who is the person over here who had asked? Again, no.
One concern is Americans' national sovereignty. There are a couple bills in front of Congress. They could come up in the next term as well. The TPP and the TTIP, that's the Trans-Pacific Partnership and the Transatlantic Trade and International Partnership. I'd like to hear what you have to say about that. Thank you.
Sure.
Thank you, Governor.
Thank you. So I think trade can be a very good thing for our country. But I think I think Congress needs to use its oversight authority here with this administration. I say that because I don't have a lot of confidence in this administration's ability. You look at their negotiations with Iran. They're willing to take a bad deal over no deal. Anybody that's been in business knows you don't want to be in that position. If you announce to somebody, I'll take a bad deal over no deal, if you're not willing to walk away from a bad deal, we're on the verge of maybe allowing Iran to become a nuclear power. If we do that, we could start a nuclear arms race in the Middle East with other Sunni powers wanting to counterbalance the Shia power with a nuclear capability, so the Saudis, the Egyptians, the Turks could end up wanting nuclear capabilities as well. When it comes to the trade deals, I think with the proper oversight from Congress, those could be positives for our economy, especially when you look at the pivot to Asia. When this president said he was going to pivot to Asia, it sounded great, but then he didn't do it. I mean, the reality is we have an immediate threat with ISIS in the Middle East. We have kind of a medium-term threat with a resurgent Russia in Ukraine. But the longer-term threat for us is going to be the rise of China and how we handle that. We have countries like our allies, South Korea and Japan, wanting us to take a greater role. We've got non-aligned countries like India and Vietnam, non-traditional allies, people that have not traditionally been with America, wanting us to take a greater role in that region. So I think a good trade deal could actually be not only good for our economy, but good for our national security if done properly. And so this is one of those areas, and it's one of those areas where the devil will be in the details, but this may be one of those areas there could be something that happens out of D.C. that's bipartisan, that's actually productive for our country. But we need to make sure the administration actually gets it right. We need to make sure they actually stand up for American workers and businesses. But I think both those trade deals could actually be good for our security and good for our economy if done properly. I think it's especially important we show up in Asia. I think it's especially important we don't cede that entire sphere of influence to China. And I worry, and I'll close with this. This president's made it a practice to try to lead from behind. That's not leading at all. He has shown through 6 years that simply wishing the problems away does not make us safer, does not make us more secure. America must lead, and ironically, the best way to avoid war is to prepare for it. I believe in a stronger America is good for America, but it is also good for the world. We need a president who believes the same thing. God bless y'all, and thank y'all very, very much for allowing me to come speak to y'all. Thank y'all very much. Enjoy the rest of y'all's conference. Thank you.
I've been to India 4 times, and I admire what you've done.
Thank you very much, sir. Thank y'all very much.